Okay. Way too much for work. You should work better. Do you know that yogurt is just yogurt? This is why I came to America.
Welcome to another episode of MIATC. Patrick, we're back after a little bit of a break again. We got that 100th episode in and then said, you know what, we're going to take a little bit of a break. That happens sometimes. Patrick, I have the flooring project from hell going on right now in our house. In order to not be dusting up an entire house with concrete dust while we have a newborn, I decided to go ahead and pull up some tile in a floor in our kind of sunroom area, and the thin set that you stick tile to the concrete with apparently came out of Chernobyl because it is the hardest stuff ever, and I'm actually having to grind it inch by inch in a not very small room. So my parents came down to help with that last week, and that's why we didn't do a show last week, and it turns out that I didn't even hardly get started on that project while they were here because it just took so long. But Patrick, you're enjoying a Fayetteville summer. Now, you're in SEC country, Patrick, and we were going to do an SEC special this week. And I know you're very upset with me because you've prepared, and even double prepared for this thing. But we're going to put that off till next week because, Patrick, your favorite sport, maybe, other than football, has a big day going on today, and that's the NBA draft. And so we're actually going to talk a couple of your favorite sports. We're going to talk some basketball. We're going to talk some baseball before we talk a little bit of SEC. So we're going to touch SEC stuff today, but the big SEC preview will happen next week. Patrick, how you doing? How's it going?
This is a huge sports day because obviously, like you said, we got the NBA draft going. I've actually got it on my TV right now. We've already had huge trades, not only in the NBA, but obviously the trade deadline for baseball is tomorrow. So huge trades in baseball have happened. Aaron Rodgers continues to make headlines in the NFL. We're just a month away before we have college football. The Olympics are in full swing.
That's what we have on in our household. We got some swimming on tonight.
We've been watching swimming and basically everything, virtually every single day. You can't even, if you wanted to, avoid what's all going on in sports right now. It's just so much.
Yeah, so we're going to hit on it.
A year ago when we had virtually
nothing. So it's a nice little counterbalance to what last year was. So we're not going to touch a lot on the Olympics, Patrick, as much as I made a joke to one of my buddies the other day. I said, if you're not sitting on a computer watching fencing finals and being upset about something, are you really a sports fan? That's obviously one I'm a big fan. I love watching some fencing. But like you, I've been watching just about everything as much as I can. I get real into rowing at times. We had that going on yesterday. Obviously, my wife is a former high school swimmer, so we watch all the swimming we can. And then, of course, we've been keeping up with gymnastics and all that's gone on there. Now, we're not going to talk about Simone Biles a bunch. I think we're both on the side of do what you got to do for mental health first. That is what's most important.
Sense.
We could talk about it longer, but we're not going to because we got a lot of other stuff going on. If you got problems with Simone Biles, be an Olympic athlete and then come talk to him. Come talk to us about it.
Problems with yourself. So sorry that you don't love yourself.
Yeah, there may be some opinions that we may get to down the road and talk about after some more things come out, but we'll let everything come out first before we really, really talk about it. But this show sides with mental health, so there's your big answer there. Now, 100%. Patrick, let's move over to basketball, and we're going to talk. We're not going to so much talk about the draft as we're going to talk about a big trade that is happening. I don't think it's officially happened.
It's official. It's official.
Is it official? Official?
Woj, it was like the second or third pick in the draft, and Woj dropped the bomb on TV that it was like 100% official.
Well, because you know how these NBA draft day trades usually work. Is they're agreed, but they're not official until like 4 days later. So like
their pick is included, like their first round pick, that being the Lakers, is included. So they technically have to pick for Washington.
Right. So it's that whole weird thing that the NBA does. But Patrick, it's huge because there's a big name going across the country. That is Russell Westbrook is leaving the Washington Wizards and going to the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, of course, there's plenty involved in terms of, you mentioned the 22nd pick that the Lakers are sending back to, or wait, is that going, oh no, that's coming to the Lakers as well. Kyle Kuzma, Montrezl Harrell, and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and the 22nd pick tonight are going to Washington. Yeah, Washington. I almost said Washington football team because that just, every time now I say Washington, I want to say Washington football team. Are going to Washington, and Russell Westbrook's coming back to the Lakers. Now, this is a Woj bomb for sure, right? Now, you're more in the NBA Twitter sphere than I am. Has there really been? I haven't heard. I feel like I've not really heard anything about this being like a thing that people have been talking about.
I haven't really heard anything about it since like 5 o'clock this afternoon. So that's how. Apparently, it's been in the works for a couple of days, but I hadn't seen anything about it until I got off work a little after 5 o'clock today. So that really tells you that either it didn't come up to surface until today, or it was just the perfect Woj bomb.
Well, and you know, there have been rumors that the Lakers were talking with the Sacramento Kings about maybe getting Buddy Hield instead, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, hey, Westbrook's available, let's go get him. And so let's break this down from both sides. Let's start with Washington, Patrick. You're the Washington Wizards. You've got Russell Westbrook. What's going on here? Like what is from their side of this? Why get rid of Russell Westbrook when you've got a bunch of young pieces around him that maybe you could have done something with? Is this just a case of the East is too strong and we're paying too much to have Russell Westbrook, or is there something else to this?
I think what it is, it's a organizational decision to build around Bradley Beal. They basically made their choice as far as who they're sticking with. I mean, they drafted Bradley Beal. They've developed Bradley Beal. They've got other pieces already there, and now they're acquiring draft capital to continue to build around Bradley Beal. Now the question is, does he want to stay there? He can sign an extension this offseason. He can wait until next offseason. He doesn't really have a ton around him right now. They've got Rui, who was awesome his rookie season before he got injured. I don't think he really stepped up to the next level this year, but that doesn't mean anything to me. They traded for Daniel Gafford, who really stepped onto the scene for them as a shot blocker whenever that trade happened. Davis Bertans is another guy who's somehow randomly come out on his own. But, I mean, obviously, if they're wanting to really build something with this Wizards program, you have to move somebody like Westbrook because, for one, that's just so much money. He definitely doesn't want to be there anyway, and you can get so much for him. And if you're going to build something, you have to have some sort of foundation. And I would make the decision to build around Bradley Beal versus Westbrook myself. So now the question is just going to be, okay, you've got Beal, Now you've got Kuzma to pair with him. You've got Rui. What can you do with this draft? Maybe next off season as well, in order to get those pieces in place to have a playoff team.
Yeah, so I actually agree with. If I'm the Washington Wizards, I actually like this idea. You stick with the guy that you brought to the dance. Look, Russell Westbrook. We've talked about him in the past, and you look at the teams that he's been on, and is Russell Westbrook one of the best players in the NBA? Absolutely. But is Russell Westbrook the best teammate you can have in the NBA? Absolutely not. And I think you look at the way you can build a team. You can build a team the way the Golden State Warriors did it, the way the Lakers have done it, and the way that the Brooklyn Nets have done it. And that's you can get several superstars and hope it works out. Or you can do what the now defending champion Milwaukee Bucks, because I don't think we've gotten to talk about that. Shout out Giannis Antetokounmpo. But you can do what they've done, and they drafted a guy in Giannis and said, we're going to build this team around you. And it might take a little bit longer, but we're going to do that. And then you go get some pieces like a Bobby Portis. Obviously, you've got Chris Middleton there, and you get some pieces and you build the team together, and ultimately they end up being a very, very good team. And you see these super teams. These super teams are very hit or miss. They either go all out and win a championship, win 2 championships, or they flame out and don't do anything. And I think that's kind of what the Wizards saw when they got Westbrook and Bradley Beal together, is that, they're both very good players, but from a team perspective, this isn't what it's going to take to get us to the next level. And I'm of the opinion, I know there are a lot of people out there who so this is not like some controversial statement, but there are a lot of people out there who would tell you that Bradley Beal is one of, if not the most underrated player in the NBA. Bradley Beal is an incredible player, and I think if you get the right pieces around him, you can really build a roster that can do something and make a run team. You're not too many pieces away if you've got a guy like him, and I think Rui Hachimura is going to continue to develop into a great NBA player, and just fitting those pieces in, and that's what the Bucks have done, and that's what a lot of these other teams. I mean, even really, you take Golden State Warriors. Sure, they were a super team, but they started off with guys. I struggle to call them a super team up until they got Kevin Durant, because they drafted Klay Thompson, they drafted Steph Curry, and then they just happened to develop all of them into great players.
You want to categorize a super team as like maybe somebody like the Miami Heat, who brought in everybody via free agency.
Right.
Or, like
the Nets, who brought in everybody free agency.
They built that up until they got Durant. When they got Durant, you're like, okay, well, now we're kind of getting into super team territory. But before him, they built that with their own hands.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the method that the Washington Wizards are taking here. Obviously, a smaller market team in terms of, tier levels of the NBA, and so you've got to be a little bit more creative. You've not got quite the pool of a Brooklyn Nets. You've not got quite the pool, obviously, of the LA Lakers. And so to get guys to come, you've got to find a guy and really just show loyalty to a guy who's been there and been great for your team and your franchise for quite a while, coming on a while now. So I think Bradley Beal is the right one to stick with there. Now, you can ask questions about some of the guys that got back, maybe. But we'll see how those guys fit in the team. So that's a question for down the road. Let's switch over to the Lakers, Patrick. You want to hear my theory on this?
What's up?
This is we are preparing for LeBron to retire trade.
Like, you've got 1 or 2 more years of LeBron, and then it's it. And
then we still need a superstar, so we're going to try and get Russell. I can't say his name. I sound like I have a speech impediment. I always want to say Russell Westbrook. Russell Westbrook. I think he's the next big name guy that they're going to have. Granted, he's 32 now, so 33, 34, 35-year-old who's on the tail end of his career, but still an elite player that they can pair with Anthony Davis once LeBron James retires, and kind of give that, hey, we're still the Lakers, we still got superstar pool. But, man, from a strictly team standpoint, I'm not sure how this is going to work.
And it's also like a fun homecoming story for Westbrook, who play ball at UCLA. So that's another pillar in the trade story. Yeah, I don't know because Westbrook is not the most when you look at a lot of superstars, the majority of them are not fun to play with.
No.
Westbrook hasn't been fun to play with. LeBron hasn't been fun to play with.
And you got two alpha dogs there, Patrick, that are I don't know how they're not going to butt heads.
Yeah, I don't know how they're going to mesh because, LeBron's going to want to touch the ball. Westbrook's literally wanting to do everything, which a lot of that is because he's had to.
Right.
Now, some of that could be, he's out there having fun and wants to do it. But a lot of those triple doubles, you can argue a majority of those is because he literally had to do everything.
Yeah.
Now he doesn't have to do everything because he's got Anthony Davis under the rim. He's got LeBron James. So he's got a lot of work cut out for him. So, if you're going to tune in to watch triple doubles in LA, you're going to be waiting a little bit because he's got a lot of help now. Question is going to be, though, like we said, are they going to mesh? And I'm going to throw in something that I haven't seen yet. Obviously, the trade's just a couple hours old. I haven't seen this yet. Anthony Davis has had injury troubles in the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
LeBron is starting to have injury troubles within the last 2 years.
Yep.
How often are we going to see all three of them on the court at the same time? You look at the Brooklyn Nets. We hardly ever saw all three of them this year on the court at the same time. We hardly did. Even through the end of the playoffs, we rarely saw all of them on the court. Are we going to see the same thing in the other end of the country where you've got a big three that is newly formed, but we're really never going to see a whole lot of them because at least one of them is going to be injured for most of the year.
Right. So is this going to end up being more of a big 1.5 than a big 3?
Yeah.
That's a good consideration. And I think, look, if you view it from that lens, it makes this trade make a lot of sense for the Lakers. Because if you're going to be without Anthony Davis for half your season, or you're going to be without LeBron because he's load managing and then missing 86 games for an ankle sprain that my wife could come back from in 3 weeks, then you need that piece in Russell Westbrook who can do everything for this team. So from that lens, if you're viewing this, and so maybe this trade might make a lot more sense for the LA front office than I originally thought when I first heard it, because that makes a lot of sense if you're the LA Lakers front office and you're thinking, man, how many games did LeBron miss? How many games did Davis miss?
Yeah.
We've got to replace that somehow. If we can get Russell Westbrook, and look, at the end of the day, you're giving up Kyle Kuzma, who's a fine, okay role player maybe at times. You're not having to give up a ton to get Russell Westbrook, I think, if you really look at it.
We're giving up depth.
Yeah.
Really.
And so maybe, ironically, I think this team will be worse when all three of them are playing in a way, and they'll be better when one of them is injured. And that might be the play here. That might be, and again, I think this legitimately is the Lakers recognizing that LeBron's on the back end of his career. LeBron's on the downswing of his career. He's clearly, man, I don't want to put words in a guy's head, but I think he's clearly at the point where he's even thinking about other stuff. I mean, obviously, excuse me, that terrible movie Space Jam 2 came out. I refuse to watch it.
I've heard that. I'm not going to watch it.
I'm not watching it. Everything I've seen says it's absolutely terrible. So I'm not surprised, not going to watch it. But he's looking at other business opportunities. He's doing this, he's doing that, and I think he's just getting to that point where he's really realizing the end of his career is on the horizon.
Yeah.
And I think the Lakers front office is looking at it and going, okay, well, what's our plan post LeBron? And Westbrook, in that sense, makes a lot of sense for the Lakers. But I don't. To me, this isn't a trade though that makes me immediately go, you know what? I'm scared of the Lakers. Like, I'm still just not really scared of the Lakers, even with LeBron, even with Anthony Davis, even with Russell Westbrook. Like that, nothing about that organization the last year and a half has really scared me.
Yeah, there's not lot of teams, like, let's say the season is going to start back up tomorrow. There's not a lot of teams that I'm just, like, scared of. Like, the Nets, I mean, if they're healthy, I'm still not even, like, terribly scared of them. Because, I mean, they probably played 20 games together, if that. The Lakers, I'm not going to say I'm really scared of them. The Bucks, for sure. Let's see. The Hawks, yeah, I'm scared of the Hawks. I would say the Nuggets. I'm just trying to think of teams just off the top of my head without really thinking too hard. I mean, yeah, there's just not like a ton of teams like right now. Like the Jazz, we scared the Jazz, definitely the Suns, but that's about it. Like, I haven't seen enough of the Nets together to scare me. I haven't seen this Lakers team enough to scare me, obviously. I mean, there's just so much injury concerns with everyone around both of those teams. So, yeah. Maybe in the middle of the season we can reevaluate that, but going in, I mean, I haven't seen those teams in their superstar mode. Now, I'll say this. If the season were to start tomorrow, I'd be scared of the Warriors again.
Yeah. Well, so to tie a bow on this, if you were to pick a winner or loser of this trade, I'm picking the Wizards.
Yeah.
Only slightly. Because I think they're set up better for the long-term future. The Lakers are very much, we're trying to win a championship now, and if we don't, I don't know what they're going to do when LeBron retires. I don't know what they're going to do if Westbrook doesn't pan out. Like, they're up a creek. With Bradley Beal, you've at least got several years of him still being in his prime, and also he's cheap enough, and the stuff around him is cheap enough that you can still build a team out. The Lakers, with just Davis, LeBron, and now Westbrook, are sitting at just those three guys are $121 million of contract next year, and that's more than, I think, 17 NBA teams, their entire salary. So, you've got some issues there if you're the Lakers. You don't have as much room to deal with. So, who are you picking as the winner? I'm picking the Wizards as the winner for now.
I mean, for me, for one, it all just depends on who they're going to fill the roster out with to help those three. Because let's say that LeBron's out for a month, or let's say Davis, has a nagging injury, is out for an extended period of time. Let's say two of them aren't on the court. We're only seeing one. Like, for one, was that trade really worth it? Oh, we're about to get a Woj alert here. Because I'm watching the draft right now. But it didn't say what the alert was. Let me go to Woj's Twitter account.
So who are you saying winning? I'm
think I'm going to go with the Wizards.
Same. Also, quick shout out, since the draft is going on, to former Gonzaga Bulldog Jalen Suggs getting drafted by the Orlando Magic. That's pretty cool.
The fact that he slid to 5, like somebody asked me when it started, like, name your top 5. I had named Suggs at 2, and he fell to 5. I don't understand that whatsoever. Also, the Wizards are getting, as part of this trade that they made, they're going to get Isaiah Jackson out of Kentucky with the draft pick that's coming from the Lakers. So that's essentially the final piece of the trade. As far as what the Wizards are getting, is they're going to get Isaiah Jackson at Kentucky.
Nice. So that Patrick is your NBA talk, and that will probably be all we talk about the NBA for a good long time. Of course, speaking of NBA players, real quick, who's at the Woj bomb? Did you find it?
I guess they mentioned the Woj bomb, but of course they didn't put what it was. I guess they were just talking about the actual trade just because it was the Lakers on the clock. I'm looking on his Twitter, and there's really nothing at all mentioning it.
Let's mention real quick before we move on to some baseball. Obviously, men's basketball losing to France at one point in the Olympics so far. So good job, USA basketball.
Well, it went back after that and beat Iran. So
well, that's not saying anything. I, when was the last time? What are we? Was Hamad Haddadi? Who's your Haddadi on that team?
thank you for that reference.
You're welcome. Former
Probably
Memphis Grizzly.
referenced him on the pod once before, but it's been a long time.
Former Memphis Grizzly Hamad Haddadi. Let's move on, Patrick, to some Major League Baseball because, as we mentioned, it is what trade deadline is tomorrow. We've seen quite a few moves. Baseball doesn't always see some superstars move, but we do usually see a lot of movement right here at the deadline. So let's start, Patrick, with the LA Dodgers, who seem to be really pushing for we're going to try and win. We're going to try and win this year because they went out and got Max Scherzer and Trey Turner from the Washington Nationals.
Apparently, it's going to include a massive haul of prospects, including Keibert Ruiz, their catcher, who, I mean, at one point the Dodgers have for a while been one of the best farm systems, and at one point they were really deep at catcher in their farm system. I know that Ruiz has been in AAA for a while just because, well, they don't need him. They've got guys like Will Smith and others there in LA. So they've got the luxury of him playing in Tulsa for the longest time, and now he's going to be with the Nationals. I'm sure there's going to be a ton of prospects because not only are you getting Scherzer, but you're getting a young talent in Trey Turner. They also traded for Dan Duffy from the Royals, so that gives them another pitcher. They're definitely trying their best. For one, I mean, they're always trying to win again, but the fact that they have made these pitcher trades, that tells me something about some off-the-field stuff that they've got going on. Shoot, name's going blank on me right now. Trevor Bauer, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, Trevor hasn't been pitching for a while, and I think if you're making those moves, I mean, obviously, Scherzer's one of my favorite pitchers in baseball, so, I mean, I think he's worth it. And plus, you're getting Trey Turner, who you can, if you want to, you can have him in your lineup for years to come and continue to build around that infield, but I don't think it bodes well for Bauer. That's all I'm going to say about that because I don't know at all what's going on there. But we've also seen a lot of other big moves, including Anthony Rizzo going to the Yankees today.
Yeah, do they need another guy up there to strike out? Is that what the move is?
Well, they also got Gallo, so they definitely got some strikeouts with him. See, this is what has been so insane to me with the last few days. So, leading up to the deadline, a lot of people within baseball were saying that the Yankees might be sellers because of how bad they've been performing. And then you've got, obviously, like the Red Sox, who have been tearing it out. You got the Rays, who have been hot. The Blue Jays. I mean, that's a pretty solid division there. And then you got the Orioles. But a lot of people expected them just to sell. And they were naming some potential pieces who you could see moving on from the Yankees that might blow it up. Well, they're doing the exact opposite, and they're bringing in a guy like Trevor Story has been a rumor for months now, and he hasn't been moved yet. Obviously, they're bringing Joey Gallo from the Rangers. They bring in Anthony Rizzo today. So, I mean, they are obviously looking to improve and get a jump start ASAP in order to just get into the postseason, and then anything can happen as we've seen. The Scherzer move, that one caught me off guard just because for about 2 hours, everyone thought he was going to the Padres.
Yeah.
And then the Dodgers stepped in and said, well, we'll give you everything. but we also want Trey Turner too.
Well, and if there's a team in the majors who has the ability to do that, it is probably the Dodgers. You mentioned their farm system, but they're also a team who's uniquely positioned to really, kind of make a run at some of these guys and be able to prepare for the short term. We just got done talking about the LA Lakers kind of making a trade that is very short-sighted. But because of their farm system, the Dodgers seem to be able to get away with this kind of time after time. Like you can trade for a guy. And look, I'm not saying Max Scherzer isn't worth it. Max Scherzer at 37 is a better pitcher than most other guys in the league still. And so, he's a guy you're hoping can maybe go 2-3 more years if you're lucky and continue to be a lockdown pitcher. And then obviously you mentioned Trey Turner. I think it makes a lot of sense if you're the Dodgers to go ahead and put all those eggs in this year's basket and say, hey, if it takes us a couple years to recover, maybe that's okay. We'll try and win a World Series on the way out. The Yankees, to me, it's an interesting move to go after a guy like Rizzo and like Joey Gallo, who, I get Gallo on the one hand that you need a left-handed hitter at Yankee Stadium, which is very favorable to left-handed hitters because of their right field, but then their lineup is basically all right-handers. And so, that kind of makes sense to get a lefty. But, man, you're just adding a bunch of strikeouts to a team that already gets a lot of strikeouts.
Yeah.
And
you definitely nailed it because you think of the guys that they've got, obviously notables like Giancarlo Stanton, who seems to strike out constantly. Then you got Aaron Judge, who, if he's not raking, he's striking out too. So Gallo, another just, boomer bust guy. They basically added a ton of Adam Dunns, if you just want to put it into historical perspective. They've got 5 or 6 Adam Dunns in the lineup. They're going to hit a deep double in the warning track or a home run. But if they don't touch the ball, they're easily striking out probably twice a game.
I'm not sure what I was expecting you to say, but Adam Dunn wasn't necessarily the name I was expecting you to pull out of the hat. That's almost as weird as me pulling out Hamada Dottie.
We got Adam Dunn reference.
And a Hoosier Haddadi reference in the same one. Patrick, what are some other teams that we reach into tomorrow, get to the trade deadline, that you still expect to be kind of active? I know a lot of people have been looking at the Mariners thinking maybe they were going to do something. I know they just traded for Castillo from Tampa Bay, but also just got rid of Kendall Graveman in what most people are extremely shocked by in
it was a head scratcher.
Mariners Twitter, especially to go to the Astros of all people. Yeah. It just seems like Jerry Dipoto is just kind of it's almost like he's making deals. It's like that scene where Michael Scott talks about starting a sentence, not really knowing where he's going to go.
Yeah.
Jerry Dipoto seems like that's what he's doing. He's like, yeah, I'm making this trade, but it's not the trade for this trade. It's the trade for the next trade. And what, sir? Just what?
He's making trades to make trades, but he doesn't know what trades he's making. He's just making trades in order to make trades.
You want to hear a statement that is a statement that says a lot without saying anything at all? This is from Jerry Dipoto. He said, I can't tell you that we will make another deal between now and the deadline, but we're not intentionally done. If we're done, it's just because we weren't able to get anything across, but we do have other things going. Excuse me, what, sir?
That was just throwing up words and hoping they formed in a complete thought.
I can't say we're done making trades. I don't think we're done, but if we're not done, if we are done, we're done because we're done. Huh?
He essentially said, we're done, but if we make a trade, it was 100% by accident.
We're done unless we're not done, and then we're done. So
if I have a couple champagne coolies, expect the trade to come out sometime tomorrow morning.
If I get a little frisky with the phone numbers, we might make a trade, but I don't know. So, okay, Patrick, so outside of maybe the Mariners and Jerry Dipoto getting a little phone frisky and trying to find another trade deal, is there any other big names you think might get traded here in the next however many hours that is until the actual trade deadline?
with Chicago moving Rizzo, that tells me Chris Bryant's going to get moved. It's
Yeah,
just
you
a
gotta
matter
think
of
so.
who's going to do it. Because to me, you're not really moving one and not the other. To me, you're blowing it up and starting over. Like, your window, congratulations, you won your first World Series in over 100 years.
Yeah.
Like, that's off. You're not going to win another one with this core. You're not going to win again with this team. You might as well make trades, try to get some prospects, hit with, one or two of those, and just start over. Like, you drafted those guys, and you were able to develop those guys, so you're just going to have to start all over again. It probably won't take you another 100 years, but I hope it does. But yeah, they didn't start Rizzo or Chris Bryant tonight. They said that they were available on bench, but was really aren't the type of guys that you make available off the bench.
Right.
You're playing them to start in order to win. That's also just weird. Like, if they're available off the bench and their names are Anthony Rizzo and Chris Bryant, why don't you just start them? Otherwise, just go ahead and tell us that you're going to try and move them. So yeah, to me, if they're either both gone or they're both staying. And since one's gone, Bryant's going to be gone tomorrow. The question is, who is it going to be? Is it going to be someone like the Giants? Is it going to be the Mets? Is it another team that we're not considering? I've been waiting and waiting for Trevor Story to get moved.
Yeah.
Out of Colorado. I'm surprised. I feel like Trevor Story has been rumored to get out of Colorado for 2 years now. Kind of like with Arenado. Arenado was rumored to be traded for 2 or 3 years before it actually happened. Maybe it's just how Colorado does things. But I feel like Trevor Story is going to be gone. Sonny Gray is another guy out of Colorado that might get moved. Kyle Schwarber. I mean, the Nationals have already basically blown it up with the trade that they made today. Could Schwarber be out as well? He's on the IL, but teams have still made calls whenever he does come back. He's essentially rejuvenized his career after leaving Chicago. And the NBA draft, they were talking about a trade, and apparently it's just part of a deal that's already happened. But that kind of threw me off for a second. But yeah, I would say that those are probably the biggest names that we're waiting for that hadn't happened yet. We might see somebody that was a surprise that we didn't expect to get moved, but here we are. I'm obviously we still have tomorrow, but I'm disappointed that St. Louis, while they just don't have a ton to move around as far as the farm system, I'm still not really thrilled that they haven't done anything to add pitching. For a while, after their runs in the postseason, and for World Series title, they struggled to get runs on the board. Obviously, they've made trades in the last 2 years in order to fix that. They're still kind of struggling in that regard, but they're also just struggling with opposing offenses. Because if you look at St. Louis, it's still, I've said this for years, it's still a makeshift pitching rotation. It's still makeshift in the bullpen. They've not really done a lot to fix that. And whatever they've rolled the dice to try to do just continues to not work.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you made these blockbuster deals for these big name heavy hitters, but you got to be able to help the offense because they're not going to be able to score 8-10 runs a game. Sometimes you've got to be able to play those 1-run games. You got to be able to hold the other offense to 1-2 runs. You can't do that with crappy pitching. You can't do that with 80-year-old Adam Wainwright who can't pitch for crap on the road.
Yeah. So I think, man, if the Dodgers weren't the favorite before, they're definitely moving up the list. I think a little bit with some of the moves they've made. Um, so that'll be interesting. But Patrick, it is time now that we talk about the big elephant in the room, and I'm not talking about Crimson Tide, Patrick, but I am talking about the SEC. Oh boy.
We've got a lot to talk about with that.
Well,
that came out
so
of nowhere.
I may talk very loudly. I don't know if my wife needs to go all the way to the bedroom so she doesn't hear things that I'm about to say about her alma mater. But Patrick, look. So obviously, look, we got to talk about Texas and OU issuing that they're, they've applied to join the SEC. The SEC unanimously voted earlier today to accept them. Now, Patrick, before we talk about the SEC and how OU and Texas Horns Down are going to fit in there, by the way, if they had a problem with Horns Down before, oh Lord, they're about to have some trouble.
I severely doubt that the SEC is going to give them any favors.
Oh no, SEC is not going to give them any favors. And those fans, look, SEC fans, and my wife's. My wife's in a very precarious position because, as an OU grad, she has been very. Is anti-SEC the correct word to say? Yes. She says yes. She has been very anti-SEC as long as I've known her. Well, Patrick, no longer can she be very anti-SEC because her beloved Sooners have decided, oh no, we need to be in that conference to have a chance to do anything. Now, before we talk about where they fit in the actual football conference, we got to talk about this little issue, Patrick, that I have with this.
The issue that you have, I'll go ahead and say, I don't believe it's, when it's all said and done, I don't believe that issue is going to stand.
Oh, what?
It'll be an issue.
These cowards, Patrick, and I use the word cowards, and I'm pointing at the camera. So if you're not watching the YouTube live stream, if you're not watching it right now, you will be watching it later if you're watching YouTube. So, well, it's not live, but if you're watching it, I'm pointing at the screen. These cowards, Patrick, if you're going to jump conferences, don't sit here and go, well, we are, but we're going to wait till our current contract runs out in 2025 instead of paying the money to leave the conference early. Which, Patrick, here's why these little cowards are doing this. It's because they're hoping, and I know this is a UT thing, I'm not going to put this on OU. I know enough OU people, they're proud of themselves, but they're not as ridiculously arrogant as UT fans are. And so this is where I'm going with it being mostly UT's fault. UT, I think, wrangled them into this and said, we're going to wait until 2025 because I bet without us, old powerful UT, old God's gift to football, University of Texas Horns Down, that the Big 12 is going to dissolve, and so they're not going to have to pay that money, which would be upwards of $8 million between the two of them to break it. Or actually, no, I think it's both of them would have to pay separately $75 million. So I guarantee you this is UT's doing. That they're saying.
Let me understand that theory. So let's say within the next 2 years, let's say 2023, we see the Big 12 essentially dissolve and the conference is no longer a thing because other schools are jumping ship. So with that conference no longer existing, so you're saying if that were to happen,
they don't have to pay the money.
They don't have to pay that.
Nope.
That's interesting.
No, because their contract's with the Big 12. So if the Big 12 dissolves, then the contract technically expires because the Big 12 is no longer around to collect on the contract. So this is a coward's move, which is why I believe it's UT who's doing it, horns down, again. Because, look, obviously OU has their own say in this. All I'm going to say is this. If if you're going to claim that you're good enough to leave a conference and that you think you can join the SEC, and we'll talk about some other teams who thought the same thing and just jump right in, but then you're going to say, we're going to do it, but we're going to wait till 2025 so that we don't have to do this. And this is also all right around the idea that TV contracts will have to be renegotiated. And obviously ESPN's a big player in this. I know they're going to say they're not. They're going to say they haven't been, behind the back talking to SEC schools and talking to UT and talking to OU about what TV contracts will look like when they join the SEC and the SEC has two more premier college football teams in it.
I don't believe for a second that ABC, CBS, ESPN, whatever, if not multiple, they definitely have a say in some of this.
Oh, absolutely.
Why wouldn't they?
Well, and I know you've heard the rumors, and I'm sure those of us who are listening, if you're listening to this show, you've probably heard the rumors of ESPN being involved behind the scenes with the American Conference and I think the ACC even trying to convince them, hey, go after this school. And look, I'm fine with that. I don't care. ESPN can clamor for schools to join other conferences all they want. My issue lies with UT and OU in this. If you're going to leave the conference, be a man about it. If you want to join the SEC, I'll put it that way. If you want to join this is some Pac-12 stuff. If you want to join the Pac-12, fine. Wait until 2025. If you want to join the Big Ten, wait till 2025. That's fine. But if you're going to join the SEC, the Granddaddy Conference, the Big Daddy Conference, just join it. You're going to make your $75 million back. Join it.
Yeah.
Don't say don't pull this crap where we're going to try and ruin somebody else's conference and hope that somebody else's conference dissolves, because that's not our problem anymore because we're going to the SEC. We just don't want to pay them. They need to just do it, pay that money so that those schools can have their TV deals, their revenue sharing match up for what they would lose from losing OU and Texas. Do that and be a man about it. If you're going to join a man's conference, be a man about leaving your own.
See, I'm going to go a step further.
Ooh.
I think...
Am I not being harsh enough, Patrick?
I know, you are.
Okay.
But this is what I think should happen just regardless. I think if you are wanting to jump to a bigger conference, then you should, pay whatever you need to pay because you're upgrading. If you upgrade anything in life, you have to pay for that. So if you want to upgrade conferences, upgrade divisions, you need to pay whatever is required to pay, and then it should start the soonest whatever possible. I think if you are wanting to change, if you're wanting to change in the Power 5, I think no matter what, with everything that's changing in all forms and fashions, you need to pay. So even if you're Arkansas and you want to move to the Big 12, I think you need to pay. I think if you're Oregon and you want to move to the Big 10, you need to pay. That's a monumental change. That's not like, I was going to go to Chili's, but now I'm going to go to TGI Fridays instead for dinner. Who gives a crap? If you're changing that much about not only your school, your program, but your community and your conference and the other, you're changing so much about a lot of the entire country in terms of athletics and everything else involved with that. You should pay 100%.
Right.
It shouldn't be we'll wait and then we don't have to pay. No, you just made a monumental shift for a lot of reasons at random. You can give a lot of reasons, but you were in that conference for so many years, and now all of a sudden you want to switch to the SEC, probably because the SEC is one of the 4 schools that gets in to the playoff. So you want to get into a conference who's constantly in the playoff. You're going to have to pay for that.
Patrick, I'm going to use your food analogy. This is like going to an Applebee's, ordering a steak, and then sitting there Uber Eatsing a steak from a downtown steakhouse and then just sitting in Applebee's and hoping that it closes before the waiter brings your bill.
Yeah,
that is.
I actually got food somewhere else, so I'm not paying that.
Yeah. I'm not. I realize you brought me a steak, but no. Don't worry about it. I'm not gonna pay it. I'm just gonna hang out here. I'm gonna eat my downtown steak. It's ridiculous. To me, it's ridiculous on that one. Now look, on this, I'm gonna say I saw this coming, and I know you and I have talked about this a little bit in text. This is, and I mentioned it to our good buddy Roger. This is the kind of movement that I've been expecting ever since the name, image, likeness stuff came up. Ever since. Why? Because what have I been saying? My whole issue with that was not that I don't want players to earn their money. If players can get paid, fine. Players get paid. But what's going to happen is this exact thing. Your Texases, your Oklahomas, they're going to move to the conference that gives them the biggest pull. And what that means is that your schools like Baylor, which, well, Baylor's maybe not a good example because they deserve to kind of burn for a little bit after all their stuff. You're talking about schools like Kansas State who have done nothing wrong, who are now going to have kids, student athletes, suffer because they're not going to be their program's not going to be as big of a deal. So they're not going to be able to get as big of deals for their players. You're going to have teams like Kansas who barely has a football team, but they're not going to be able to earn as much money because they're not SEC schools. And what's going to end up happening, Patrick, and this is what we talk, I talked about it more on a level of your Sun Belt schools being so far down the list of schools, your American Conference schools dropping farther down the list, your MAC schools dropping farther down the list because all those kids are going to say, well, I'm going to make 7 figures. You got that kid in Texas, Patrick, with the mullet, who is talking about skipping his senior year of high school football because he can make 7 figures if he enrolls early into Ohio State now.
Yeah.
And this was my problem all along, is that at some point in time, with the name, image, likeness stuff, you had to have figured out a way to make it so that it was semi-fair across the board, or you were going to have this situation come up. You were going to have essentially a super conference. And look, don't think that the Big Ten is off the scales on this. Like they could be coming. Like, oh, what's to stop Ohio State now from saying, well, crap, we need to go join the SEC too? What's to keep Clemson from joining the SEC? What's to keep Oregon and, well, Stanford's not good enough right now, but a Pac-12 school from saying, look, let's make this a 25, 30-team league in the SEC. We're all the schools making money anyways. Let's do that. Forget all those other guys. We'll do a playoff system, a 12-team playoff that's basically just our conference. We'll play our schedule, and then we'll forget about everybody else. And that sounds fine on the surface, Patrick, to a lot of people because, oh, well, athletes are getting paid. Well, great. But what happens when those conferences are the only conferences that now matter, i.e. that one conference, the SEC, ends up being the only conference that matters, and then you've got 100 other schools that are relegated to essentially D2 status, and now you've got schools that were making at least their money back and were able to pay for other programs, women's sports programs, programs like baseball, like tennis, like golf, programs like that benefit more than just a small group of male athletes. You're now looking at those schools no longer being... I mean, look, we saw when a lot of this stuff started coming up that a school like Cal had to cut back a bunch of their programs. Remember at one point Cal had to cut back like half of their men's programs because of budget costs, because of the different things that were going on. And that's where you're going with this, is that... And I don't want people to, like, if you're out there listening, don't think this is not like a slippery slope, like, weird, but like this is what we're seeing happen. Like you're seeing what I've said was going to happen. You're seeing players get money. Great. Awesome. That's great. But now you're going to see the domino effect of what happens when those big name schools start looking at it and go, crap, we're going to get left out. We're not going to be getting as much money. Like, I think I was telling my wife this. I don't remember if it was her or if it was somebody else. So I apologize to her if I am not attributing this correctly. But I was telling somebody, what you're going to see is now you're going to see these schools like OU and Texas and Arkansas, take any of your big name schools, those schools were getting sponsorships from a lot of these places that are now going to be directly paying athletes. And you look at it, and on the surface, that's fine. But now you're talking about schools are going to start losing money from donors. Schools are going to start losing money from local businesses who were donating money to the school, but are now saying, well, why don't I pay Joe Blow starting left tackle? Why don't I pay the entire offensive line to be, because I'm a barbecue joint, why don't I pay all of them? And then I won't give a couple $1,000s to the school that I normally give to the school. So what you're going to see is these schools like OU, like Texas, some of your big name schools go, well, where's all the TV money? And that's going to be at the SEC. That's going to be at a major, quote unquote, super conference that's going to happen. And it's going to ruin the rest of what college football is. And that may be fine. If you want pro or minor league football at the collegiate level and you want it to be 20, 25 teams, fine, great. You're probably going to get it. And what you're going to end up getting is a 12-team playoff that is essentially just the SEC with, whatever 1-2 teams that decided to stay out of the super conference is. And is it going to be good, fun football that I'll probably watch? Yeah. But, it's going to ruin a lot of the fun that you and I and real football nerds have of watching the Hawaii test at 10 o'clock at night, of watching BYU play Coastal Carolina, of watching Maction on a Thursday night. Like, it's going to ruin a lot of that because those teams aren't going to be as good. They aren't going to be as fun to watch. And ESPN's not going to pump money into those when it can just pump money into the SEC and make it NFL Part 2.
Yeah. I know whenever it first came out, we explored several different options that could come about of NILs. Obviously, this being one of them, we explored polar opposites. Basically just brainstorming out loud. Now, with Oklahoma and Texas joining the SEC, this isn't like your A&M and Missouri joining the SEC 10 years ago when A&M wasn't great and Missouri definitely wasn't great. Like, those are just random schools for some reason. I still don't even know why they did that.
Yeah, I'm not really sure either.
Like, I don't. It was
I'm not sure why the
crazy.
SEC wanted them.
And then you had other schools randomly jumping ship. Like obviously West Virginia joined the Big 12 because they had to replace those two schools. There was other but that's nowhere close to the magnitude of Texas, who you can even take football out of the equation. Like Texas is a top 25 program in basketball. Texas is a top 25 program in baseball. Texas is a top 25 program in so many other men's and women's athletics.
Right.
You can say the exact same thing for Oklahoma. Like top 25 in men's and I believe women's basketball. Top 25 in baseball. Top 25 in one of the best softball programs.
Yeah.
And then the list goes on. And then let's throw in the mammoth that's college football. So those are two of the biggest names. One of them for, performing on the field, and the other for
having lots of money and thinking they're going to perform on the field.
Yeah, exactly. And
horns down.
This is what I was talking to Kayla about not too long ago after the fact. It's good for the SEC, obviously. But let's throw Arkansas into the equation, for example. We're both Arkansas fans. What was one of the bigger draws about Texas kids? Arkansas could go into the state of Texas, talk to kids, and say, "Okay, well, you can go play at Texas. You can go play at Texas Tech, or you can go play at Oklahoma, or you can come to Arkansas and compete in the top conference in college football. That's the SEC." And that would be a big draw because it's a name brand conference like the SEC who's always playing your Alabamas, your Floridas, your LSUs, your Auburns, your top contenders. And the SEC is always in the playoff. Well, now, all those kids who are in Texas can now stay home and play in Texas or play close to home in Oklahoma. They can still go to Arkansas because Texas produces 100 million, at least 3-star football.
Right.
Don't even get me started on 4 and 5. Like, there's still enough athletes to go around, but it's a much more tighter competition because now you've got 2 more top programs who can now say, you can come with us, play in the SEC, and contend for a national championship, especially Oklahoma, who's already a top 10 team competing to get into the playoff. Now they have the SEC name brand. That's going to be even tougher just for recruiting alone. Those kids out of Texas.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the actual football side of this for a second, and then we'll get out of here. And we'll actually talk full on SEC next week. We'll go full SEC next week. But Patrick, let's from a football side of this, and you brought up recruiting, and that's going to be an interesting thing to keep an eye on. Here's what I think for schools like Arkansas, for schools like Texas A&M, for schools like LSU. Even Missouri to some degree. All the SEC schools pull from Texas, obviously. Everybody tries to pull from Texas. What I think is more likely to happen is not that, sure, there will be more competition for those 5-star athletes, but I think, again, who this actually hurts is not OU Texas, it's not Texas A&M Arkansas, not Missouri, it's not those SEC schools. This is going to hurt the smaller schools, your Oklahoma States, Kansas State, Arkansas State, Louisiana Tech. It's going to hurt schools like that because those schools were able to go in and say, look, I understand you've got an offer from Texas, but how many other guys have an offer from Texas? How many other guys have an offer from Arkansas? You can go to this smaller school and maybe start for us. And I think a lot of guys are going to go, yeah, but now those schools are SEC schools. And
on top of that, they can pay me more than what I can earn in Ruston, Louisiana.
Exactly.
Or Columbia, Missouri.
And so, again, the side of the spectrum that, from a football perspective of them joining the SEC is I think a lot of the quote-unquote parity that we've seen over the last 10, 12 years of your schools like your Sun Belt schools coming up and performing well against the Big 12 has been because people have looked at it. Athletes have looked at it and gone, you know what, I'm technically not getting paid if I go to UT. I'm technically not getting paid if I go to Arkansas State. I'm a 3-star. I can probably start at Arkansas State or at least be attempting to start my freshman year. I might not be starting until my senior year at UT. I'm going to go to Arkansas State, start for 4 years, put a bunch of film on tape, and hope that I get drafted. Well, again, now you've got a school like Texas that is already a rich school and can now put the SEC name behind your athletics. You're going to have a bunch of kids that are going to go, man, I can go maybe fight for a spot as a freshman at Arkansas State, or I can go sit on the bench at UT for 3 years, collect a cool $60,000 a year, and then start my senior year and get drafted in the NFL. So from that side of the football things, I think, again, it's not going to necessarily hurt UT. It's not going to hurt OU. It's not going to hurt Arkansas and Texas A&M that they're joining. It's going to hurt the smaller schools. Now, let's talk about this from a football side of things in terms of where these teams fit into the conference, Patrick, because I think, obviously, if they're not going to join, if they're going to be cowards, I say it again, cowards, and not join until 2025, Patrick, we're not going to get to talk about OU and Texas in the football program, or their football programs against SEC football programs for a couple years. But let's talk about where they fit right now. Because if you look at it right now, what they've got to do, what both OU and UT have to do the next 4 years, the next 5 years before, I guess it's 4 years, before they join the SEC, Patrick, is they have to dominate the Big 12. They have to start telling kids now, you've got a chance to play in the SEC. And hope that that works for recruiting, and hope that that works to build a program, because you have to have your program ready to go when you join the SEC. And I got to tell you, right now, UT, we're not even going to mention it. UT is not back. Our is back, Patrick, is not UT, because UT is still not back. Obviously, we know they lost Sam Ellinger as their quarterback, so they're going to be starting a new quarterback next year on a team that was already mediocre at best. You tell me that team that is at UT right now, that program is ready to go into the SEC. I'm going to tell you right now, they're a 6-6 program at best in the SEC. OU is a little bit different a story. Obviously, they've got Spencer Rattler, and we'll see if he develops into an elite quarterback next year. I still think he's above average at best, but if he can develop into an elite quarterback, and you can get some kids to start coming to really improve that defense over the next couple years, they've got a shot at coming into the SEC full blast, ready to go. But they have really got to figure out that defense. They've really got to. To me, they need to be a team that wins 10 games every season until they're in the SEC, or else I think they're going to start the SEC, their SEC careers, quote unquote, off at being an 8-4 team. And if you're OU and you start off, if you're OU and if you're UT and you start off in the SEC at 7-5, 8-4, you're in for a good 10, 12 years of 7-5, 8-4, occasionally getting a 9-win season, occasionally getting a 6-win season, because the SEC is not built in a way that you can just, that those teams with what they have, with the strength of the Big 12, you're going to be able to jump straight across those conferences and have the success that OU is having currently. We see them struggle year after year after year in the playoff when they get to playing elite teams. Yes.
I don't mean to hop sports like this.
Okay.
But we're circling back to a sport that we've already previously talked about because we're mentioning a name that we discussed that could get moved within the next day.
Uh-oh.
So I just decided to refresh my Twitter feed with Jeff Passan, one of probably my favorite media member in terms of baseball. He retweeted a tweet. The Red Sox are acquiring Kyle Schwarber from the Nationals.
Ooh.
So that's a name that we thought could get moved. Again, even though he's on the injured list at the moment, now he's going from Washington over to Boston.
Interesting. All right, Patrick, real quick before we leave, let me get your thoughts just real quick on where you think the OU and UT fit in the current SEC landscape and what you think they need to do to be the most prepared to join the SEC in 2025. Cowards.
Well, I'm taking like NIL and everything out of consideration right now. This is just terms of what they need to do to succeed. Obviously, Oklahoma, they have the offense. They're going, obviously, can't really get much worse than what they had been, but they are starting to climb the ladder. Problem is the ladder for them is very tall in terms of building a defense.
Yeah, their defense was much improved last year. I'll give them that.
It's much improved.
But when you're much improved from a pile of dog doo-doo to, like, being the spot of grass that's dead because your dog's peed in the same spot, like, when you're going from poop to that, like, it's a big jump, but also...
It's a big jump. It's still not good, but you still made a big improvement. Like, I don't know. There's still plenty of work to do on that defense, but they are building a foundation. And that is what was key. They never had any type of even foundation on that defense.
Yeah.
You would randomly see like one guy get drafted in the first or second round of that defense. You're like, how's that possible? They were terrible, but he was the only guy that was doing anything. He was flying all over the field, making all types of plays because no one else could make plays. Because technically someone has to make tackles. And technically they were doing that. But they were definitely improved from last year. They need to continue to do that. They can't get complacent with the progress they've already made because there's still plenty of that to be done. Because the offense really, a lot of times, wasn't the issue. If you're going to compare the two, it was the defense. Texas, getting actual athletes in the building is going to help. I mean, I love little Jordan Humphreys, but he wasn't doing much.
Let's be honest, Patrick. They've got to find a quarterback. They have got to find a quarterback who is like Sam Ehlinger in that he can be a 4-year starter, but unlike Sam Ehlinger in that he's actually good.
Yeah, like going to the Texas Bowl, being the Texas Longhorns, isn't the end game. Like,
no.
That's not what you're there for. So obviously that's not the pinnacle of Texas Longhorn football. So developing players, keeping coaches in play for maybe another year or two than what you're keeping them for at that particular time. Like, you got to be able to give the coaching staff ability to develop the people they brought in.
Yeah.
But also, the coaching staff needs to do a better job of bringing in actual athletes that deserve to carry the Longhorn name instead of just bringing in guys who should be playing at maybe a Texas Tech or something like that, but they decided to jump onto the Longhorns. Like you said, like they haven't had a quarterback in a very long time. They haven't had any type of studs on defense for a very long time. They keep whiffing on coaches time after time. They're not bringing in really the best names. They're just bringing in the biggest names.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of times, name brand doesn't get the job done. So, I think it starts from the very top, and that's above the coaching staff. I think it probably even goes above the athletic director. I think it goes to the pinnacle and trickles down. I think a lot of it has to do with their ego because of the Rose Bowl and their Vince Young days and everything happened before. Like, they keep thinking that they're going to magically turn into that team.
Yeah.
But nothing that they've done will prove that they can get back to that era. Like, they don't have the coaching staff. They don't have the leaders in the athletic department who are making those moves. They don't have the players. They can't develop the players that they have.
Ironically, that team's in North Carolina with Mac Brown.
Exactly. Like,
but I think that's a good place to leave it. I think I'm both excited and a little annoyed that they're joining the SEC. I think it'll be fun, but I also see where return to previous rant about how that's not the best thing maybe for college football, but it'll at least be interesting. So there is that. Patrick, if people want to follow us, where they need to go, Twitter at Matt. I almost did it wrong. At MIATC Show on Twitter, at Matt_Sindelar, at Patrick_Howie. At MIATC Show on Instagram, and of course, Matty Ice and the Chief on Facebook. Like, rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff wherever you get the podcast from. Go watch us, subscribe on YouTube so you know when we go live. All that good stuff. Be prepared, folks. Next week we start our college football preview, which means we're going to start with the SEC. We're going to work through each conference of